Let me monitor.
Let us cooperate for the young. Let us cooperate for our land. Let us resolve to fight together. See we do it right together. Can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must do his bit.
Let us cooperate for the young. Let us cooperate for our land. Let us resolve to fight together. See we do it right together. Can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must do his bit.
Welcome to another edition of the Public Interest, and allow me to wish you all a Happy New Year. You know, there's a Roman god Janus, after whom the month of January is named, and Janus is a two-faced god, and he's the god of beginning. So it is very appropriate that this January we should not only look forward to 2022, but we should look back to what happened in 2021, and this is what I intend to do on this edition of the Public Interest. I will look at some areas. I can't deal with the entire 2021, but I look at some areas of greatest importance to the Guyanese people, to the public. And the first area, of course, is territorial security. You know, for the last 55 years, Guyanese have been preoccupied with the Venezuelan threat to our territory. Venezuela has issued decrees. It has instigated insurrection in the Rupununi. There have been incursions. They've seized vessels up to the 21st of January last year. Venezuela seized a vessel in our maritime waters. And the entire borderland, 800 kilometers of border between Guyana and Venezuela, has been a zone of banditry, of contraband, of crime, and disease, of harassment, incursions, and migration. We may wonder as Guyanese citizens, what has been our response to these threats to our territorial security, not only for the last 55 years, but the last year when these things have been happening. We've been told that diplomacy is our first line of defense. And if we believe that to be true, we may wonder why there's no Guyanese ambassador in Caracas. Why is there no Guyanese ambassador in Brasilia after 16 months of the PPP civic administration? We still have not been able to appoint ambassadors to these, I would call, frontline states, which have an impact on our territorial security. And strangely enough, and I found it, unbelievable that in 2021, coming to the end of the year, the government announced that the Guyana Defense Force would be deployed to collect garbage. You would think that now that we're approaching the ICJ, month after next in March, our case will be coming up before the ICJ. You would think that we would be at the peak of readiness, that we'll be able to tell our friends that we are ready to ensure that our territorial sovereignty is not compromised in any way. But what announcement does the government make? It says that the Guyana Defense Force will be deployed to the city of Georgetown to collect garbage. Now, I think that is counterintuitive. I'm not sure it was going to inspire, anybody in the country to think that we are serious about the territorial dispute. Further, we know that over the last few years, because of the internal problems in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, refugees have been streaming across the border, particularly in the Barima-Waini, what we call Region 1. There are now about 36,000 Venezuelan migrants in Guyana. And when you consider that the population, the Guyanese population, the local-born population of Region 1 is 26,000, you may well wonder, where are these 36,000 Venezuelans? So we have a very difficult, dangerous situation in Guyana as far as territorial integrity is concerned. It's very worrisome. Venezuelans over the last 55 years have described the whole Essequibo as the zona en reclamación, which is Spanish for the zone that they want to reclaim. But if the Venezuelan migrants continue to come into Guyana, particularly Region 1, at the rate they've been coming over the last few years, it will turn from a zona en reclamación to a zona en ocupación, in which it will be difficult to find Guyanese, in Region 1 after a while. The big problem for foreign policy or foreign relations is what exactly is the government of Guyana doing about these territorial problems, about the banditry, about the seizure of boats, about the insecurity, about the sindicatos, about the failure to appoint ambassadors in Caracas and Brasilia. How well prepared is the government for the case that is going before the ICJ? So I start today's edition of the public interest with asking the question, are we prepared, really prepared to defend our border, to deploy the GDF to the 800 kilometers between Guyana and Venezuela? Or are we really serious about sending the GDF to collect garbage in Georgetown? So this is a big problem for me, and I would ask that, as Guyanese citizens, you turn your minds to this question of territorial security. The next big problem we Guyanese have to face in terms of our foreign policy and foreign relations is the question of transnational crime. We know very well that, 20 years ago, at the beginning of this millennium, we experienced something called the Troubles. That is, there was gun running, money laundering, narco trafficking. These were the main characteristics of the Troubles. Once you have foreign guns coming into the country, and we don't make guns in Guyana. Brazil is one of the world's largest exporters of small arms, Taurus series of weapons. Once you have drugs coming into the country, people are going to use weapons to protect their turf. And a very prominent member of the PPP administration at that time described the Troubles as drug gang warfare. Some people have tried to say it was an ethnic conflict. It's drugs. Drugs, that is the big problem. And what we see happening now in Guyana, despite Guyana belonging to or signing on to the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime since 2004, during the Troubles, despite signing on to the CARICOM Security Treaty in 2013, despite security arrangements and agreements with Brazil, we still see that transnational crime is a big problem. And when the coalition was in government, we set up something called the National Anti-Narcotics Agency to suppress drug trafficking. My friends, once there's drug trafficking, there is going to be violence. There are going to be gun crimes. There are going to be massacres and shooting in this country. And the coalition administration between 2015 and 2020 established the National Anti-Narcotics Agency to supervise the fight against international drug trafficking, particularly cocaine trafficking. But since the PPP administration has come into office, we have had arriving in Antwerp, in Belgium, a shipment containing 11.5 tons of cocaine. This is serious. This is not a few grams of ganja. 11.5 tons of cocaine arrived at Antwerp. In Hamburg, in Germany, 1.5 tons. In Rotterdam, in the Netherlands, half a ton of cocaine, all within the 16 months of the PPP administration. And in the face of this, they dismantled the National Anti-Narcotics Agency and they disregard the National Drug Strategy Master Plan. The National Drug Strategy Master Plan, in some form or some shape or other, has been in existence since President Hoyt was there in 1990. It has had different permutations, different editions, but still we have a national drug strategy master plan. And despite that, the present administration seems to have completely disregarded it. And Guyana is once again on the road to becoming a narco state. I warn you, my friends, once we start shipping narcotics by the ton, cocaine by the ton, there is going to be more violence in this country. So it is something that we need to pay attention to. If we are adherents to the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Ministry of Home Affairs have an obligation, not an option, they have an obligation to enforce our responsibilities to prevent and suppress narcotics trafficking and to ensure that people involved in it are punished. But when you look back at what's been happening over the last 16 months, there is not much cause for celebration at all. Similarly, we have agreements with Brazil, for over a decade. Brazil has a border with Guyana of over 1,300 kilometers. We know that guns are coming from Brazil. We've had illegal aircraft landing. Can you imagine aircraft being lost? It's like a burglar coming into your house, and when you catch him, you say, "I'm lost." Well, the illegal aircraft are probably bringing cocaine into this country. We don't produce coca, we don't produce cocaine. And the cocaine that is being shipped to Rotterdam and Antwerp and Hamburg is coming across our borders from one country or the other. We don't know. And I don't know if the government could be a little more open with the people of this country, because we are going to suffer. The poor people of this country are going to suffer. This is exactly what happened during the Troubles. In this country, up to now, there are 4 big monuments at Bartica, at Ivlery, the police compound, Buxton, and Lusignan, commemorating the amount of people who died because of drug violence during the first decade of this millennium. And unless we suppress transnational crime, unless our ministries, particularly Foreign Affairs, Home Affairs, and Legal Affairs, come together to suppress transnational crime, come together to fulfill the obligations under the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, we are going to be heading for rough waters. Oil or no oil, we are going to be heading for difficult times. And I urge that citizens, if the government doesn't care, citizens call for the reestablishment of the National Anti-Narcotics Agency and for the promulgation of an updated National Drug Strategy Master Plan. My friends, the third area of concern when we look at what happened in 2021 is the area of what I call transactional foreign policy. What do I mean by that? I mean that the type of foreign policy that we are adopting or that we are adhering to seems to have drifted from principled policies. For example, in the Caribbean community, there was in the early stages an agreement that there should be coordination of foreign policies. But when we speak of transactional foreign policy, we mean that the government of Guyana seems to have gone off on its own. For example, we had relations with what is called the SADR, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. People call it the Polisario. I think the armed wing is called it Polisario. For over 31 years, since 1979. Then suddenly, in 2021, we hear not from the government of Guyana, from the government of Morocco, the country which seized the territory claimed by the Sahrawi people. And for a long time, we didn't recognize it because we felt the occupation was illegal. But suddenly in 2021, we hear from the government of Morocco that the Moroccan occupation of that territory has been recognized by the government of Guyana. A complete reversal of a policy position. Why did we do it? Well, that is what I mean by transactional foreign policy. Something is happening. Why didn't our own Ministry of Foreign Affairs report that to the Guyanese people and explain to the Guyanese people why it had to happen? Why did we have to hear about it from the Moroccan government, the Kingdom of Morocco? Similarly, as you know very well, early last year, it was the United States Embassy which announced that the government of Guyana was opening a commercial office for the ROC, which is known as Taiwan, the Republic of China. Not the People's Republic of China, the ROC is the Republic of China and Taiwan. Again, we didn't hear the news from our own Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We heard it from a resident embassy in Georgetown. What's happening here? Is it that we've abandoned consistency? Is it that we've abandoned, principles? Another aberration, I will call it, is that we have defense agreements with the Caribbean community. We have defense agreements with Brazil. And I said before, we have a 1,300-kilometer border in Brazil. We have Brazilian instructors in Guyana up to this moment. I was trained in Brazil. Many officers in the TDF were trained in Brazil. The Brazilian army came into the Rupununi and dug wells. But suddenly in August last year, we see a huge team led by senior ministers of our government going to Cayenne. Cayenne is not even a country. Cayenne is part of a country called the Republic of France. Cayenne is what you call, or Guyane is what you call Département d'Outre-mer, an overseas department of France. But we sent our prime minister and a team of foreign ministers, but the minister of legal affairs was not in that team, strangely enough. And they go to French Guyana, Guyane Française, whatever you choose to call it, and they sign an agreement for something called the Guyana Shield Strategic Dialogue. Nobody knows what it means. The Guyana Shield is a geographical entity stretching from Colombia right down to Guyana. It's mostly ecology and environment. So when you see this Guyana, France, Suriname, security master plan, you really wonder what motivated it. If so, if you're talking about the Guyana Shield, why isn't Brazil in it? Brazil is the biggest country in the Guyana Shield. Could it be properly called the Guyana Shield Strategic Dialogue Master Plan or whatever the name is? So this is very baffling. It seems that we have adopted this policy of transactionalism, and the issue with the Polisario, the issue with Taiwan, the issue with France, they don't seem to be part of a coherent strategy based on principles. And then when you add to it the downgrading of the only high commission we have in the Anglophone Caribbean in Port of Spain, again, you speak about the Caribbean policy, you speak about enhancing, CARICOM relations, and then you remove the ambassador and you just leave a shell. So the whole concept of transactionalism seems to be embedded in the present foreign policy thinking. I don't think it's going to end well. We have to have a principled strategy which allows us to plan over a long period of time. We have to think long term. We can't be jumping, from month to month. Oh, Morocco says we should do this, or United States says we should do that, and France says we should do something else. And then further, we send a delegation to Glasgow. We sign on the dotted line. But Glasgow has implications that Guyana has certain obligations to fulfill in accordance with its commitment to COP26. Now, when you look around Guyana, you see that there is environmental degradation. You see the flooding continues. You see mangroves being removed. You see the mines being extended. Now, we need to know as citizens whether Guyana is actually implementing its agreement, its obligations under COP26, and whether the degradation that is taking place is under control. We don't hear anything about it. I don't know if Guyanese know if we are still compliant with the commitments that we made at COP26 in Glasgow just a short time ago. So these are some of the concerns we have with this form of transactional foreign policy, transactional diplomacy, that month by month, the Guyanese people keep being surprised and astonished at these swings in policy, as if people have mood swings, and foreign policy, rather than being consistent, seems to be jumping from issue to issue. And it is not only disappointing, but it will lead to distrust by the people, in which they are not sure that the policies which exist inside the country, domestic policies, are being accurately reflected overseas. And sooner or later, we, the Guyanese people, will have to pay. Now, the fourth area of interest that I wish to examine this morning in reviewing our foreign policy and foreign relations in 2021, in this first episode of Public Interest for 2022, is the transformational change that was predicted or recommended again at the start of this millennium, close to the start of this millennium. As you know, we had a foreign minister, Rudy Ensenadi, a very experienced diplomat, who came into the foreign ministry as minister. In fact, it is, it's a very uncertain, because he wasn't actually appointed foreign minister. He was appointed minister within the ministry of the president, or the office of the president. And he invited, I presume he invited the United Nations to send a mission to look at the foreign ministry. What has happened is that for the first 10 years of the PPP administration, from 1992 to 2002, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs experienced some difficulties. A lot of experienced diplomats were sent away. The place was in chaos. And the chaos came to a climax with the Surinamese Navy expelling the CGX petroleum platform from our maritime waters. And as a result of that, the president of the day and the foreign minister of the day attempted unsuccessfully to negotiate with the Surinamese. I don't want to go into the reasons for the failure of those negotiations. Eventually, we went to the ICJ and we got a ruling in our favor. But what happened after the CGX affair is that it became quite clear that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs needed some cleansing, and Mr. Rudy Ensenadi was appointed minister, and the previous minister didn't even vacate his office, and the new minister, Minister Ensenadi, had to occupy a place in the second floor. But I'm not going there. What I know, or what I feel happened, is that Minister instantly realized that the corrective work, corrective surgery had to be done to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that is why the United Nations mission came, and it conducted a very important study. It was an advisory mission. It was not an executive commission of inquiry. It was advisory. And it published a report in 2003, which is 19 years ago. But that report is very important because I think it pointed into the direction of making the Ministry of Foreign Affairs a professional and effective instrument of Guyana's policy. And in my mind, to the extent that we varied from those recommendations, I think to that extent we ended up in a sort of quagmire. That is how we are where we are today in terms of transactional diplomacy and so on. So we're looking for transformational change. And even though that report was 19 years old, I think there were some elements which were never implemented. And I think now in 2022, we must revisit that report and see which elements or which recommendations could still be implemented to improve the performance of the foreign ministry for the benefit of Guyana. And one of them, of course, was that there should be a strategic plan. And I think this would get rid of the ad hocery that has been characterized by the transactional diplomacy that we saw in 2022. If you have a strategic plan which guides our diplomats, our policies from year to year rather than from week to week, we wouldn't be astonished by these surprises with France or Morocco or Taiwan. A strategic plan would help our diplomats to think and to conduct their affairs over a long period of time. We should get away from short-termism and start thinking strategically. And one recommendation from the United Nations mission was that there should be a strategic plan. A second recommendation is that there should be a Foreign Relations Council. This is not meant to intrude into the province of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But it is meant to give him additional advice that he should consult with civil society, he should consult with the opposition, he should consult with experts at home and abroad, so that we have the best possible advice in shaping Guyana's foreign policy. To my mind, to my knowledge, there is no Foreign Relations Council as yet, and that's the second recommendation of the United Nations mission. I think we should revisit. A third recommendation, there were several other recommendations. I can't deal with all at this edition. The third recommendation that was made is that the Foreign Service Institute should be placed on a sound financial footing. In fact, that there should be a Foreign Service Institute and it should function. That is what the mission should have said. And we don't know that it functions at all. But the mission called for it to function and to be placed on a sound financial footing. Now, you cannot depend on selecting diplomats or persons who retired from political parties or persons to whom you owe favors or widows of former PPP ministers. You need to have trained diplomats. And for diplomats to be trained, you have to have a working Foreign Service Institute. In most of the Anglophone Caribbean, it is impossible for persons to enter the Foreign Service, much as to be promoted or to become ambassadors, without attending postgraduate advanced training in international relations. And international relations is not just diplomacy, it's international law, it's commerce and treaties and diplomacy, all other, you got to learn to negotiate. So the Institute, to the extent that it is not functioning, is depriving the Cooperative Republic of Guyana of qualified diplomats. So those are three recommendations I want to leave with you on this public interest program. One is that there should be a Foreign Service strategic plan. Second is that the Foreign Relations Council should be established. And third, that the Foreign Service Institute must be placed on a proper footing. And Guyana must desist from the practice of sending ambassadors or high commissioners or even other diplomats overseas who are untrained in international relations and all of the varieties of international relations, including international law and international commerce. If you are to pursue economic diplomacy, we need to have the FSI functioning. My friends, these are the challenges that face Guyana in 2021. And now in January 2022, as we look forward to a successful year, as the oil money started to flow, I understand there are $534 million waiting to be spent. I sincerely hope that some of it is spent on improving the quality of performance of Guyana's Foreign Service. May you have a very successful 2022, and I hope that our foreign relations, reflect more accurately the aspirations of the Guyanese people. Thank you.
Let us cooperate for the young. Let us cooperate for our land. Let us resolve to fight together. See we do it right together. Can we do it? Yes, we can.
Each man must